Welcome to History with Herodotus, where we delve into the depths of the past to uncover the complexities and nuances that have shaped our world. Today, we embark on a journey to explore one of the most pivotal moments in modern history, Operation Bagration, the Soviet Union's massive offensive against Nazi Germany in 1944. This operation, named after the Georgian prince Pyotr Bagration, who fought against Napoleon's armies, would prove to be a turning point in the war on the Eastern Front. In the early years of World War II, Germany's military machine had been rolling across Europe with seeming invincibility. However, their invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941, codenamed Operation Barbarossa, would prove to be a fatal misstep. The Soviet Union, despite suffering heavily in the initial onslaught, managed to stem the tide and begin pushing the Germans back. The year 1943 was marked by significant victories for the Soviets, including the Battle of Stalingrad, which saw the complete annihilation of the German Sixth Army, and the Battle of Kursk, where the Soviet Union decisively defeated the German forces in what would be the largest tank battle in history. In the spring of 1944, as the snows began to thaw and the ground hardened, the Soviet High Command, led by Joseph Stalin, began planning a massive offensive aimed at the German Army Group Center. This Army Group, under the command of Field Marshal Ernst Busch, was positioned in Byelorussia, now Belarus, and was considered one of the strongest components of the German army on the Eastern Front. The Soviets spent months preparing for this operation, amassing millions of soldiers, thousands of tanks, and an enormous quantity of artillery and ammunition. The plan was to launch a series of coordinated attacks that would encircle and destroy the German Army Group Center, thereby creating a breach in the German lines through which the Soviet forces could pour into Eastern Europe. As we move closer to the summer of 1944, the tension builds. The Germans, aware of the impending attack but uncertain of its scale or direction, scrambled to reinforce their defenses. Meanwhile, the Soviets worked tirelessly to deceive the Germans about the location and timing of their offensive, using elaborate deception tactics to keep their enemy guessing. The Soviet Union, driven by a desire for revenge against the invaders who had ravaged their country, was ready to unleash its full fury upon the German army. In the days leading up to the operation, the Soviet forces moved into position, their artillery dug in, their tanks fueled and ready, and their infantry poised on the brink of a great leap forward. The air was thick with anticipation as the soldiers waited for the signal to advance, knowing that they were about to embark on a journey from which there would be no return. As the clock ticked down to the launch of Operation Bagration, the world held its breath, poised on the cusp of a new era in warfare and international relations. As the clock struck midnight on June 23, 1944, the Soviet artillery unleashed a barrage of unprecedented ferocity, signaling the beginning of Operation Bagration. The earth trembled beneath the feet of the German soldiers as thousands of guns and mortars laid down a carpet of fire that stretched across the horizon. The cacophony of explosions and screams filled the air, a chilling harbinger of the carnage that was to come. In the first few hours alone, the Soviet artillery fired over 100,000 shells, shattering the German defenses and sending shockwaves through their command structure. As the sun rose on June 23, the Soviet infantry and armor began their advance, pouring out of the forests and swamps like a tidal wave. The once vaunted German Army Group Center was quickly overwhelmed, its troops reeling under the relentless onslaught. The Soviet forces moved with a speed and precision that caught the Germans off guard, exploiting the weaknesses in their defenses and driving deep wedges into their lines. By the end of the first day, the Soviets had already achieved significant breakthroughs, capturing key towns and villages and sending the German army reeling. One of the most significant events of Operation Bagration occurred on June 24, when the Soviet Third Army, led by General Alexander Vasilevsky, launched a daring assault on the German-held city of Vitebsk. The city, a strategic hub in western Byelorussia, was fiercely defended by the German 53rd Corps, but the Soviets were undeterred. After a brutal and intense battle, the Soviet forces broke through the German lines and captured the city, cutting off the retreat route for the German Army Group Center. As the German troops fled in disarray, they left behind vast quantities of equipment and supplies, which the Soviets eagerly seized, further bolstering their advantage. As the operation unfolded, the Soviet Air Force played a crucial role, providing close air support to the ground troops and destroying German aircraft on the ground. On June 25th, Soviet planes launched a series of devastating raids on German airfields, destroying over 300 aircraft and crippling the Luftwaffe's ability to respond effectively to the Soviet advance. The skies above Byelorussia were now firmly under Soviet control, allowing their ground forces to operate with impunity. The German army, meanwhile, was in full retreat, its troops streaming back towards the west in a desperate bid to escape the Soviet onslaught. But the Soviets were relentless, pursuing their enemy with a ferocity that bordered on frenzy. On June 26th, the Soviet Fourth Army, led by General Pavel Batov, launched a brutal assault on the German-held town of Bobruisk, which was defended by the remnants of the German Ninth Army. After a savage battle, the Soviets captured the town, cutting off the last escape route for the German Army Group Center and condemning tens of thousands of German soldiers to capture or annihilation. As the Soviet forces advanced deeper into Byelorussia, they encountered scenes of unimaginable horror, evidence of the atrocities committed by the German army during their occupation. In the town of Minsk, the Soviets discovered a mass grave containing the bodies of over 100,000 civilians, brutally murdered by the Germans in a frenzy of violence and hatred. The discovery sparked outrage and fury among the Soviet troops, who redoubled their efforts to crush the German army and bring its leaders to justice. As the Soviet forces advanced deeper into Byelorussia, they continued to uncover evidence of the atrocities committed by the German army during their occupation. The discovery of mass graves, such as the one in Minsk, sparked outrage and fury among the Soviet troops, who redoubled their efforts to crush the German army and bring its leaders to justice. By the end of June 1944, the Soviet forces had already achieved a significant breakthrough, capturing key cities and towns, including Vitebsk, Orsha, and Mogilev. The German Army Group Center was in full retreat, its troops streaming back towards the west in a desperate bid to escape the Soviet onslaught. As the operation unfolded, the Soviet forces began to exploit the weaknesses in the German defenses, driving deep wedges into their lines and cutting off the retreat routes for the German army. On July 3, 1944, the Soviet forces captured the city of Minsk, the capital of Byelorussia, marking a significant turning point in the operation. The capture of Minsk was a devastating blow to the German army, as it cut off their main supply lines and escape routes. As the Soviet forces closed in on the city, the German troops were trapped, and tens of thousands were captured or killed. The conclusion of Operation Bagration marked one of the most significant defeats for the German army during World War II. The operation resulted in the destruction of the German Army Group Center, with estimates suggesting that over 300,000 German soldiers were killed or wounded, and over 100,000 were captured. The Soviet forces, on the other hand, suffered significant losses as well, with estimates suggesting that over 180,000 Soviet soldiers were killed or wounded during the operation. As General Georgy Zhukov, one of the leading Soviet commanders during Operation Bagration, noted, the operation was a masterpiece of strategic planning and tactical execution, and it marked a significant turning point in the war on the Eastern Front. The success of Operation Bagration paved the way for the Soviet advance into Poland and Germany, ultimately contributing to the defeat of Nazi Germany. Today, Operation Bagration is remembered as one of the most significant military operations in history, marking a major turning point in World War II. The operation is celebrated in Russia and Belarus as a symbol of Soviet bravery and sacrifice, and it is commemorated with numerous monuments and memorials throughout the region. As historian David Glantz noted, Operation Bagration was a testament to the Soviet ability to plan and execute large-scale military operations, and it marked a significant shift in the balance of power on the Eastern Front. The legacy of Operation Bagration continues to be felt today, serving as a reminder of the devastating consequences of war and the importance of remembering the past. That's all for today's History with Herodotus. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, remember that, to understand the present, we must first understand the past.